Hello and welcome to Rubbin'minds. My name is Hero Daniels. Many thanks for joining us. Imagine a Nigeria where leaders are accountable, citizens are empowered, and the economy is thriving. Now imagine a country where an ex-government official would actually be sentenced and serve time for corruption and not given 500 million naira bill for an alleged 80.2 billion naira. It's exactly 19 months, 1 week since the Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration took over the reins of power in Nigeria. And as you know, good governance, economic development, and citizen engagement are the building blocks of a prosperous and a stable society. And we seem to have a challenge with that. In 2022, 5 kg of a bag of local rice was about 25,000 to 30,000 naira. Right now, in 2025, a 50 kg bag of imported rice is about 35,000 naira. Now, if you want to talk about the 50 kg bag of imported rice, a much larger one, you are talking about like 100,000 naira. Should I talk about the prices of tomatoes? Should I talk about the prices of oil? Yes, of course, there has been a little bit of progress. The NNPC recently crashed down the fuel prices. However, food prices still remain the same. So in this particular segment, we really want to talk about leadership from a holistic point of view, not just from the government, but also from the citizen. And joining me to discuss governance and economic development, leadership accountability, and citizens' engagement is a human rights advocate. Peter Aka, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
So good to have you on Rubbin'minds. I know that you are very vocal when it comes to issues of governance. In fact, your T-shirt literally reads "Justice for Nigeria." So I'm going to start from... Let's take an analysis of the government in the past 2 years. Yeah. Where were we?
Yeah.
And where are we currently?
Okay. So if we want to take an analogy or an analysis of where we are, we can talk about the economic indices. We had fuel at 700 naira when this government came into power. Today we are at about 900 and something from NNPC. Some places 1,000 something. We are of course the poverty capital of the world.
It was 160 then.
Yes, at some point.
Yeah.
And then we talk about forex or exchange rate, the naira to the dollar, the value of our currency. And then of course we are still, battling with the problem of extreme and multi-dimensional poverty, and all of these other issues compounded with insecurity and the lack of social security to Nigerians, but most importantly, the cost of living crisis for Nigerians. So this is where we are now. And the question is not that where were we and where are we? It is, what are we doing? Are we headed in the right direction? Is it getting better, or we are going to get worse off with time?
All right. I like your last statement because, earlier on this year, Vice President Shatima did make a statement that Nigerians will enjoy, that all of the policies and all of the sacrifices that Nigerians had to make at the beginning of administration, that we're going to begin to see the effect.
Yeah.
And some people would argue that, the NNPC price crashing from I think about 1,030 naira or so down to 925 naira is an indication that the economy has stabilized. Do you think the economy has stabilized, and what should we even call stability?
Exactly. I think excellent question. What is economic stability to a person? What are the social securities available to Nigerians? What is the cost of the human development index of the country? What is the minimum wage? At what cost does a Nigerian live? We live in a country where people wake up today not knowing where the next meal is coming from. This is compounded with insecurity. More than 80% of the country are self-employed. You provide your own power, you provide your own, because of course the national grid is collapsing and standing up at intervals. You are your own security, and with all of that, the enabling environment for even small and medium scale businesses to thrive. So Nigerians are basically just surviving instead of people living. And even when the constitution provides that the welfare and security of the people will be the primary responsibility of government, now imagine a government that is only able to produce poverty, corruption, and at the end we are seeing an increase in criminality. So the government can continue saying what they are saying. We are going to put it vis-a-vis the quality of life of the people. When you talk about the kind of luxury that, of course, the vice president is living in a mansion that was renovated or built with about 20-something billion. The Dodan Barracks residence of the vice president is being renovated in Lagos, and all of those kind of wastages in government. Yet government says, continue to make sacrifices, manage, while we keep the affluence and the luxury. So Nigerians will have to decide.
Okay, so they say leadership is always a reflection of the society.
Yes.
Why have we been consistently having issues of good leadership, quote
Yeah.
and unquote,
Yeah.
consistently from governments to from one government to another government.
Yeah.
Does that not reflect a very bad society? Because these leaders also come from amongst us.
Well, we have a fundamental problem of leadership. And even though leadership comes from the people, the problem with Nigeria is that we have not put focus where we ought to put our focus. We have not addressed the most important issue, which would be what? The electoral process. The process with which leaders get into power. And then again, we now create a system that is able to hold people accountable. Because where there is no accountability, anybody can do anything in Nigeria and go away with it. I mean, the entire process of 8 years of Buhari administration, everybody is gone. Nothing happens. So until Nigeria begins to know that the first step of building a democracy is the system through which your government gets into power, and you pay attention to INEC, because that is the weapon that is formed against you and your democracy, INEC. If you are not able to make it such that you can vote in a leader, and if you are not okay with them, you can now vote them out. Because I will ask you the question, if your leader does not perform properly, what is your option? What do you do? After 4 years, they can rig themselves back into power. After 8 years, they can bring someone who is even worse off. So that is the painful thing about Nigeria. Identifying what we need to do, pay attention to it, and fixing it. Or else, the lamentation goes on.
And why haven't we fixed it for so many years?
Because, of course, it is not an easy task when you see that there are divergent views in the country. When you want to begin something, a lot of people will talk, but that is what I have been putting my focus on, electoral reform. Of course, we need judicial reform, we need law enforcement reform, but we must identify and double down on INEC, especially because 2027 is around the corner. So Nigerians must get that awareness that if we do not fix elections in this country, we are not fixing anything. Because what is the incentive, or what is the deterrence for a leader not to behave badly? Because you can reward yourself with another 4 years, you can continue going. And if nobody pays attention to it, I mean.
So is it that Nigerians are not paying attention to it, or Nigerians are too afraid to speak up? Because if you consider the economic indices where we find ourselves in right now, as compared to the Goodluck Jonathan administration,
yes,
Goodluck Jonathan administration increased fuel, and a lot of people took to the streets, protested, you know, even currently people in power,
people in this government led that protest, yes.
And now we are having a much worse situation. We're having a worse situation,
yes,
and nobody wants to protest.
Yes. It's a combination of the two factors. Of course, generally in Nigeria, there is a political fatigue. People are tired. Combined with the fact that one of the major times when Nigerians came out to protest against something, they were met with incredible use of force, even lethal force, talking about the NSAS protest in 2020, October 20. Now, when you see a government or successive governments that begin to clamp down on dissent, government who see people who criticize government as enemies, where known criminals are being rehabilitated, you have what they call Operation Safe Corridor. Boko Haram members were given amnesty, even empowered. But youths who come out to demand that they are being killed or have police brutality are met with even more brutality. Naturally, there will be fatigue. But Nigerians should not be tired, because what is the other option? Whether or not you decide to clamor for change, we are dying. People are dying silently. The law enforcement brutality is still going on. The cases we protested against. So it is better we summon the courage and come out and make a demand peacefully and know that you want change, because the other option is not what you want to consider.
Okay, now let's talk about the government and how each arm is supposed to be independent.
Yes.
And, of course, on paper they are independent,
yes,
but there are some people of the school of thought that the independence of the legislator and the independence of the judiciary is just on paper, especially with the current government.
Yes.
And they say judiciary is the last hope of man, and then there's a particular lawyer that actually wrote about the rots in the judiciary, and of course we know how that case went, Mr. Barrister Farotimi.
Yes.
And of course that case is still ongoing, and he hasn't made any media appearance, you know, since then. So how would you assess the independence of other arms of government apart from the executive arm of government?
Let us be very honest. The bane of every democracy is the strength of its institutions. But the Nigerian judiciary today, as it is, I may not even want to call it a judiciary, because they will have to decide if they are a judiciary, which is an independent arm of a democratic government, or is the Nigerian judiciary the legal department of any political party in power. When you have, you know, a government, the executive, building houses for judicial officers and all of the kind of calisthenics we see there. Then when you cross over to the National Assembly, you saw during the last budget presentation, lawmakers, both Senate and House of Reps, greeting the president with the president's political anthem on their mandates they stand inside the hallowed chambers of the National Assembly. And this has happened within the 2 successive years of this president. That is, instead of the National Assembly seeing themselves as coordinates with the executives, they rather sit as subordinates. So there are no checks and balances. Whatever the executive wants will go, as long as what the lawmakers want also go. Nobody checks the budget. How are we padding it? What is going on there? The Senate president can decide to share prayer points through emails and whatever. It is just a tale of recklessness and rascality in the corridors of power. And this kind of situation is not sustainable, because everybody becomes a victim to it. When you speak up, they clamp down on you. If they go after you, Nigerians will need to come together and build institutions where there are checks and balances, because absolute power, of course, will corrupt absolutely.
All right. Peter, can we try and see if we could outline some of the wins that we can attribute to this current government? Some people would say that, yes, before President Tinubu came into power, that most states were almost bankrupt, and now that the states, there's money flowing. Some people would say that the policy, I think the judiciary gave the local governments autonomy. So it means that the local governments are now closer to the people and they have more resources so that it can affect the common man. These are just but a few examples. But what would you say is it truly a win for the government? What is that one thing you can say that the Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration has done well?
Look, as much as you would want to say a government will do well with its policies, you have to look at the attendant result. Your policies vis-a-vis the quality of life and its intention. A policy is not good until it affects the life of the people it is made for. So when you're talking about you want to give local government autonomy, within the first 13 months or 9 months of the Tinubu administration in 2023, after removing subsidy, of course, truly the state governments amongst themselves shared a total of about 13 trillion. More money went to the state. But what was that money used for? A lot of them are complaining they cannot even pay the minimum wage of 70,000. The problem with Nigeria is not a resource problem. It is a corruption problem and a cost. If you give local government autonomy without accountability at the local and state level, you are only decentralizing corruption. You are now moving corruption that was held by state governors to local government chairmen. They also become bosses, sit tight with the money. If they misappropriate the funds, what is done? So that is where my own interest is. It is not about what you are doing. What exactly is the cost of what you are doing? That policy you are talking about, giving local government autonomy, you are only telling me that you are cascading corruption. So chairmen have more money to spend, to embezzle. Governors have been embezzling, so let us move it down. Or do you need more people to be foot soldiers for your election? When you come, you need to take power from the governors. Is that what you're trying to do? So in all of whatever you're doing, if the quality of life of the common man on the street is not being positively affected, please just spare me the story.
Okay, and that leads me to my next question. It's almost 2 years of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, and it seems like the government is still booting. Yes, of course, there have been several excuses as to, we made the economy bad. We had to do surgery, and we had to take out the fuel subsidy because the indices for economic growth before we took over were false. So now we're starting from the ground up. By next year we'll start talking about another election. All the focus and resources will be pushed towards that. What is the future of Nigeria with the current state?
I mean, the current government said that they promised in 2023 that they were supposed to hit the ground running. So with 2 years, we don't know if the ground has been hit or if they are the takeoff point or whatever it is, but we are almost into half of this administration. The 8 years of the Buhari administration, to put it lightly, was an absolute disaster for Nigerians. Nigeria needed stable hands that are competent visionary leadership to stop the bleeding, begin the healing, put this country on the path of productivity, and close the loopholes to corruption. If this government is still struggling 2 years into, look at the president's cabinet. A cabinet of about 50 ministers. Look at the budget of 2025. It should tell you the priorities. If we are still talking about building more offices, renovating the presidential villa for billions of naira, buying SUVs for office of the first lady, talking about things that are frivolous, When a country has more than 90 million people living in extreme and multi-dimensional poverty, a government has more than almost 50 ministers, a lot of them former governors and all of that. So your guess is as good as mine. We need to get serious with leadership because it is blood business. These are lives of human beings that are on the line. And if Nigerians fail to take this into consideration, we are only trying to become our own accomplices to whatever that is going on. Because there is a point where you are a victim and it gets to a point where you become an accomplice, where you fail to speak up. We have to do something about leadership.
So does this have anything to do with the party? And the reason why I ask this question is the APC government handed over to an APC government.
Yes.
But the current APC government always falls back to the mistakes of the previous APC government, saying that, these were the mistakes and we're trying to correct their mistakes instead of saying we're trying to correct our mistakes. So is it so much of a party problem? Do Nigerians need a change of party, or is way deeper than just party? Because most of these people also, if you check their track record, some of them have come from PDP, they moved from other parties. Even currently, the Labour Party have a lot of candidates moving from LP. People voted for them on the mandate of LP, and they see them, they're moving to APC and all of that. So,
I mean, Buhari and Tinubu are each other's legacies. But Tinubu brought in Buhari, he helped to bring him in, Buhari helped, so they inherit themselves in a certain way. And do not forget that at a point, the APC kept singing about the 16 years of PDP. We should not forget that. When the APC came into power, it was 16 years of PDP. Now, the APC by 2027 would have spent 12 years. If you add another 4 years, it will be 16 years. So they have gone full circle with the PDP. So imagine spending 32 years of a human's life under incompetent and mediocre leadership. So as much as it is about political party, it is also about citizens' participation. Citizens must understand that the most powerful office in the land is the office of the citizen. You are the one who will continue to place demands to hold people accountable. If not, what you see is what you will continue to get. People will treat you as bad as they want for as long as you do nothing. We say nothing. So if we want to build Nigeria and we want to be able to get leadership that reflects us, we must show that we are resilient enough to do what is right. Great nations are not built overnight. Don't be discouraged because you tried once and it didn't work. We have to keep trying until we get that Nigeria of our dreams. So you can continue to change parties. Some of them might even move to another party and contest. It is problem that is changing name and location. The basic fundamental problem is not being addressed.
All right, and with that, let's talk about citizen leadership.
Okay.
Yes, because the political leaders are right in front of us, we sort of see what's happening, and they say leadership by example. So most times people emulate what they see. However, I mean, you've seen cases where people beat traffic lights, there's disorderliness, there's a queue, but the average Nigerian wants to jump that queue.
Yes.
And then when you feel like you have a bit of money or a bit of status, you just want to cut corners. These are prevalent activities that Nigerians engage in day to day. So how do we address citizens' mindsets? How do we imbibe the right kind of leadership into the everyday Nigerian?
Look, every human being will do what is convenient for them per time unless there is deterrence. In America or in other climes that are working, if you go there, beating traffic is an offense, smoking while driving is an offense. I have seen expatriates in Nigeria who beat traffic, who urinate by the roadside, who smoke and drive, because here there are no consequences. Anything that will cascade to the people must come from the leadership. When there is irresponsibility and recklessness on the part of leaders, everybody will take a cue. Have you seen politicians convoyed on the road? Who beats traffic more than them? In fact, they can even hit a civilian. So anybody who is learning is taking a cue from what you are seeing the leaders do. We must get leadership that is reflective of us, and then where there are laws that are enforceable. When somebody knows that if I do this, I will get this, not knowing that if you go to the police station, you can bribe your way out. If you go to the court, if you have connection, you are free. Whatever you do, if you know somebody somewhere, you are okay.
What do you make of, I mean, we're almost out of time, but what do you make of the alleged 80.2 billion by former Kogi State Governor Yaya Bello? In fact, he got a hero's welcome back home. Of course, the case is still on court, but he has been released on 500 million bail. What do you make of that?
So allegedly, if somebody allegedly misappropriates 80-something billion and you give me bail of 500 million, I mean, I should be able to afford that. So the question will be, what next? Remember the fiasco of even getting this former governor to court. EFCC went there at some point. The securities attached to the former governor shot sporadically in the air, forcing EFCC to go back. But that former governor still has EFCC, And the question is, if you do not fall out with the ruling party, would your own case be heard? The former Kogi State governor is one of them. We have 35 other former governors. If they are in the same, party with them, does that mean they are covered? The former party chairman said, when you come to us, your sins are forgiven. Nigeria's problem is what people need to pay attention to hold leaders accountable. If not, they will continue to do bad and then rub it on your faces, and there is nothing we will do. You give them heroes. He can even become, if he goes back to the party and they become friends, he can contest for president in 2027. And if you do nothing about INEC, he will be your president. So there is no consequence.
All right, thank you very much, Peter Aka, human rights advocate, for coming on the program. I wish you the very best. Rubbin'minds continues after this break. Stay with us.
Now it's time to show